Hey, everyone. Hey, PL. Hey, Draw Spec Sketchbook. I want to shout out you guys first because I saw you first in the chat. I really appreciate you guys for being here. Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Lewis. I'm a professional artist and graphic designer. And Sundays is the day that I work on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. And I'm really happy to be here. I always look forward to Sundays. I always look forward to seeing you guys in the chat. We're gonna pick right back up where we left off last Sunday with the Three of Cups. I did not work on this past hour live stream. Just a little bit. I did finish up like the skin tones and everything in our grandmother. So we're just gonna pick right up with the same character by working on her costume. And yeah, we're just gonna let it do what it do. I hope you guys are having a great weekend, a great weekend, and have had a great week. And I hope next week is gonna be good to you as well. So the plan here is just to use my Queen of Wands, which is going to be in my reference panel below me as a reference for my grandmother figure. And then we're just going to skip around the page if we have time. Usually we scream about an hour or so. But lately we've been going a little bit longer because I've been enjoying myself on the canvas. So before we get into what we're going to get into, just a little bit of housekeeping. I am working in Clip Studio Paint, specifically version 1. There are four versions to my knowledge. I think the fourth version just dropped of Clip Studio Paint. I work in version 1. It works just fine for me. I have considered upgrading to version 4, but I'm in no particular hurry. It works pretty well for illustration purposes. There are lots and lots of programs out there to choose from. This is just the one that I transitioned into from Photoshop. If you guys see me looking down, I am actively working on a screen display tablet. I have my glove on that helps my hand glide across the screen, and I'm using my stylus pen today. So yeah, we're just going to jump right in. So I think what I'm going to do before we start is I am going to turn off my sketch just to kind of have a look at my grandmother's skin, just to kind of see if I need to smooth anything, because again, I have not looked at this since last Sunday. So to smoothing out any areas that I think may need to be smoothened out before we move on to her clothes. And then again, if we have time, we may jump to a new character. But I think for right now in her neck, there needs to be just a little bit of work. And then we're going to move again onto her clothes, just right up in here. And I hope you guys can see my cursor moving. If not, you guys will get a chance to see the color here pick up. But yeah, I hope you guys had a great week. I intended fully to work on this a little bit throughout the week, not a whole lot. I am sort of balancing out a couple of cards at once, just so that I can get the project done. And for you guys who are new here, may not have ever heard of the Cosmic Gateways Tarot, this is a dream project of mine that I started in 2019. November of 2019 is when I completed my first card. That was the High Priestess. Second card was the Justice card, and from then it was just whichever card I felt like picking up at the time to create. This is going to be a 78 card deck, so this will be a full size tarot deck. It will be a little bit bigger than your average tarot deck, so it'll be the slightly taller, slightly wider. For those of you who do use tarot and may be familiar with Crow Tarot, to be about that size, so smaller than the Oracle. Bigger than a standard tarot, somewhere right in between those two sizes. It will come with a guidebook, and again, I do have plans for a companion book, and the companion book will have like artist notes and all. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. It'll have artist notes, and it'll also have breakdowns of each card that'll expand a lot on the story. But I have not decided whether or not I'm going to launch that at the same time as, what am I doing? I don't know if I'm going to launch that at the same time as my as the deck itself. But I do intend to have a companion book that'll be like a pretty deep dive. So I think coming to the live streams is a great way to learn sort of my thought process and the things when it comes to the card designs. But the book will be like even more fleshed out. So that's already in the works. I have so far about 3 chapters in it written. The very beginning, which is an intro. I have a section about how to read tarot for those of you who are new to the medium or just are curious. How I particularly read it, how I would suggest a new reader study it, right? It'll also have some information about what the Cosmic Gateways are, my intention for the deck, how you can use it, all of those good things, goodies will be in that companion book. And then the guidebook will just be a standard tarot guidebook, which will have the interpretations for the cards. based on the images that we create. So me doing this is sort of like a video diary to sort of help me keep track of, my intentions, because I have cards that I've been working on again since 2019. So sometimes I forget or it's just not fresh on my mind what I had intended for a specific meaning, why I decided to, make certain decisions and things like that in the creations of the cards. And so I do keep a little bit of a journal, but these help a whole lot, these videos. So, but yeah, that book will contain all of that extra information. So I don't know yet if I'll be launching it at the same time as the actual completed deck. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll kind of get a around the time and it'll still always be in works as I work on the images themselves. So I'll just kind of see where I am and whether or not I feel like I should push it through to completion before or at the same time that I launch the deck, or just kind of wait so that I can make sure that I have like the quality editing and all of that done, and then we'll launch it afterwards. Maybe see how the deck goes and then launch it. I don't know. We'll see. But that is the sort of the gist of the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. I decided to create this deck out of a need to see myself or the things that I enjoy and are drawn to represented in tarot, specifically in spiritual imagery, just as a whole, right? Because I wasn't seeing myself represented, I wasn't feeling represented. I was a lot of times feeling pandered to, and in a lot of the decks that I was coming across, I just kind of felt like I don't know, they felt really heavy. They felt very weighed down by negative emotion. And so when it came time for me to find a deck, I was having a really hard time finding something again that I could relate to, that I liked. That spoke the language that I spoke in terms of, looking forward to the future and healing past some of the things that we've gone through as a society and as a people. And so I was like, well, you know what? Rather than wait on someone to sort of answer my prayer and create a deck that I want to see, why don't I just do that myself? So what I'm doing here is I am just sort of laying in shadows, and I just actually lowered the opacity. It might take a minute to catch up. I lowered the opacity of my sketch, which will allow it to still show up, but a little more faint. So if I were to crank it all the way up, we'll see it big, bold, and black, but that's kind of in the way because I'm painting underneath it. So I do want to tone it down just a bit. And it may be hard for you guys to see on your devices, your phones or your tablets or however you're watching this. But for me, I can see it just barely, and that's good enough for me because it'll give me a guideline without getting in the way. Right. So I do have my sketch set to multiply blend mode, which means that it'll blend into whatever I draw underneath it. So I can turn it all the way down to a 13% and it'll show up still. So I just turned that down. And then within my layer, my yellow layer, I'm just sort of laying in shadow. So I'm approaching it the exact same way that I approached the face, where I started off with base shadows to sort of let me know where I want the folds to go. And then from there, I will add highlights and things like that. This doesn't really have to be as elaborate as the Queen of Wands, because the Queen of Wands was the main character of this image, of her image, right? But with the Three of Cups, because we have four characters, we have quite a lot to paint. I don't want any one character to compete with our main character, who is the little girl. And I'll turn up the sketch here just a second. Let me deselect this so you guys can see it pretty good. So our main character is our little girl in the forefront. So I don't want anything around her to compete with her, because we'll give her all of the attention and all of the love and the flowers, and she'll glow in the whole thing. But I do want it to complement, right? So I still want it to look like it belongs in the scene. I don't want anything to feel like an afterthought. I just don't want it to feel as important as our main character. So the story that we're developing here is that our main character, the little girl, is going through her coming of age ceremony, and she's surrounded by her family, the women in her family, her grandmother, her mother, and her big sister. And they're sort of giving her, her flowers, and sort of giving her the energy that she needs to move on to the next phase. So I just turned down my sketch again, and we'll zoom back in here just a moment, find my granny's clothes, and then we'll work on that. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about the prospect of this being an actual deck. Again, this has been, it'll be 6 years in November since I began. It is a labor of love. It has taught me so much about myself, so much about the process of publishing something and managing a project of this size, especially when it comes to someone like myself who is hired a lot to create projects, right? But this is one of the largest that I've ever done. It taught me a lot. And in sort of developing this, and I think as most artists, it's a great idea for us to sort of challenge ourselves to, just go beyond what we're comfortable with, right? And so this week, our focus of the week, because I usually pick a card of the week to share on social media, the focus of the week was the Hierophant card. And the Hierophant, I don't recall in which order I created the Hierophant, but I do recall it being one of the most uncomfortable cards that I've ever created, just because of my own sort of feelings about that particular kind of character, right? And so, in creating the deck and in facing that particular card and my discomfort, I had an opportunity to figure out, one, why was I so uncomfortable with it, right? And I think at the same time, I was also watching His Dark Materials, and there is a group called, I think, the Magisterium, I believe, because it's been a minute since I watched it. But like, I was seeing them in that card, right, along with some of the sort of history and the historical significance of a hierophant type, right? And so I was going through all of my feels. I was, sort of making peace with, not necessarily making peace, or just sort of coming to an understanding of the importance of someone like a hierophant on anybody's spiritual journey, right? Um, and I think that by doing so, it sort of allowed me to look at it slightly different, right? Slightly different. It allowed me to do some research into it, right? So, like, why is the Pope, which is what that card was originally named, why is that even a figure? But you also have the devil, you also have things like temperance, and all of these different aspects of a spiritual journey are present. And so it just kind of allowed me to dig a little bit deeper into it, and it allowed me to force myself, or sort of challenge myself, to find another story, right? So we talked a little bit about visual storytelling as we've developed this deck. And I think that was one of the early examples of me really trying to figure out, how can I communicate the importance of this character, even with my own sort of negative associations with this particular figure, right? And so the way that I approached that was to, rewrite history in a way, or sort of rewrite his story. And so doing so helped me out a lot. It made me sort of make peace with, or figure out why it was I was having an issue with it. And it sort of all came down to the purpose of this particular deck. One of the things, again, that I was having trouble with when it came time to find tarot decks for myself to read and practice with, was the fact that I was not seeing myself. And I started to sort of step back and zoom out of that situation and look at it from a perspective of, why is it very difficult for me to find positive imagery of a certain demographic, meaning specifically from the African American experience. It's very difficult for me to find positive imagery in the spiritual aspect, and so that became one of the driving forces for creating this deck, right? Because I feel like, if you can see yourself in images of greatness, if you can see yourself from a slightly elevated space, that gives you something to strive towards. And so, in my humble opinion, having being able to just sort of see yourself in spiritual imagery is extremely important, because many of us are very spiritual people, right? So they came up with the Hierophant. Those sort of feelings were, I guess, reintroduced with the creation of the Hierophant card. And, I just challenged myself. And so, again, I try to do my best to create positive representation throughout this deck. And I've been trying to tap into various cultures, right? Because the diaspora is widespread, and I want to have people feel represented that may not have otherwise been represented. Now, I've seen, again, lots and lots of decks that speak to certain experiences and things like that, but a lot of them feel as if they're sort of pandering to struggle, right? And it wasn't in the cards for me to do, right? So here we are. So yeah, anytime I can have a chance to highlight a specific aspect, I do try to be authentic to my own experience. I do try to speak to my own interests, but I don't think that I'm just this super special being and uh um everything that I want to see, no one else wants to see that. I don't feel that way. I feel like this is just the time and the place to create something along these lines. So here we are. So now what I'm trying to do here is, now that I have my shadows in place, I'm sort of thinking about where light will hit my grandmother's dress, right? So I am using my little girl who's in the center as a light source. So ideally, she will sort of radiate very much like her crown. So she'll sort of radiate like this, and the light will hit various places on our grandmother, on her mother, and her sister, just sort of depending on how I want to stack them in the scene, right? So by that I mean, although this is a 2D image, and I'm going to turn up my sketch just to sort of demonstrate just a bit what I mean, we do have three people surrounding our little girl, right? With this, we can determine how close or far away these three people are by establishing where we want our light. Oh, great. Draw Sketchbook says sometimes we have to create the things that we want to see in the world. Absolutely. And I stand by that 100%. I stand by that. And not only do I stand by it, but I recommend anyone who is trying to create something to create what you actually want to see, right? Because if we spend our time waiting on people to sort of read our minds and do the things that we want to see, we'll be waiting forever. I was actually just talking to my son recently about movies because we were having a conversation about why there are so many remakes. And I think he was telling me, because he's a fun fact kind of kid, he was telling me that someone had wrote a movie, and I think it was Paramount or whoever they had pitched the movie to decided they were going to pass on this original story because there was no sort of existing lore about it, right? So this was a brand new story. And the problem with that is that, and I had to explain this to my son, they were doing that because that's where, if something is familiar, then there's a likely chance of making money. Whereas where there's something that's unfamiliar, they're sort of weighing out the risks. If we know that larger companies are operating in this space, or people with a little more pull and influence are operating from this space, but there's something that you want to see, you actually have to be the one to do it a lot of the times, right? And it's scary. It's extremely scary because, again, you don't see that in the market. And just sort of using that example, if we know that people sort of gravitate to what they know, it can be intimidating. It can be a little bit scary to take a chance. But I think that I would prefer to take a chance and do my best and sort of be as true to myself in the art that I create. And I recommend you guys do the same, than not, and have this sort of lingering hunger that there's something that I want to create and I'm just too scared to do it. Right? Or I'm thinking that it won't do well because I want to lean into the expectations of other people. So as artists, as creators, as people, business people, whoever you are in this world, if there's something that you want to see, I highly recommend just going for it, right? If you fail, that's sort of part of the process. Maybe that'll teach you a different way to sort of look at the problem or look at the thing that you want to create, but do it anyway. Right? Do it scared. A lot of times we, talk ourselves out of things because we don't, again, see it in the marketplace, or we don't see anyone doing the same thing, or maybe we don't feel like we're the right person for it. And we go through all of these things, all of these emotions when it comes to like imposter syndrome and all of those things, right? We all experience it at some point. But it won't get done till you do it. Right? Or somebody else will have the courage to say, you know what, well, I think that this will be a good idea. And it ends up being the same idea that you had. And, it could have been you, right? And they have success with it, or whatever the case is. What am I doing? Whatever the case is. So, yes, absolutely. Draw Sketchbook. I very much agree with you on that 100%. That is not what I wanted to do. Here we go. Let me go. So what I just did was I actually painted over the hand because the layers are set up in a way that the skin is underneath my clothing layer. In order to fix that, what I did was select the skin by going down to my granny skin layer, not clicking on the layer, but just going down to it, hitting the control or Windows button if you have a Windows computer, clicking on it. And now let me deselect it so you guys can see it. We click on it with holding down the control, and it just sort of selects that area while I have my clothing layer selected. And then from there, I could just erase. It looks like I did too much of an erase. There we go. And so I can just erase the area where the skin is sort of touching. I don't have to worry about it. Another way to approach that, just to make sure it doesn't happen, is to select the clothing. And then that way, everything that I paint within these sort of dotted lines. Now, I don't know if you guys can see it, so I'm going to zoom in. And hopefully you guys will be able to see the selection. It'll be flashing a little bit. Is it showing up for you? There we go. So everywhere we see sort of this selected area, right? This little very faint dotted line is where our pixels will go. So as we brush across the screen, then it'll only go on that place. All right, but yeah, draw sketchbook, fantastic point. I absolutely agree with you on that. So that's sort of the gist of where we are with the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. It was something that I wanted to see. I still have not seen anything quite like it. I've seen some things get pretty close, right? But I have not seen anything quite like it. I think that within spiritual imagery itself, just as a medium, as a genre, there is such a void of like, non-struggle imagery that I'm hoping that maybe this incites others to sort of take the chance to do the same thing, because I collect decks. I got all kinds of tarot decks in there, and I would love to have something not quite the same, because you know what I mean, tell your own story, but I would love to have other decks to sort of strengthen my collection, right? I would love to see it, and I think that it's very much needed. Right now, of course, we always hear that representation matters, but it matters in such a huge way that for me, for example, I wouldn't be an artist had I not had the exposure to that, because I didn't know that that was an avenue that I could explore, right? I had no idea. I had a teacher, Miss Owens, who was super helpful and pivotal in sort of letting me know that this was an option for me. Otherwise, all I could see in my mind was, doctor, lawyer, military, or like teacher, right? Because that's all that I knew. Or of course you see like athletes and stuff like that. I did play a lot of sports when I was coming up, so maybe that was an avenue. I have no idea. But what I do know is that art was never sort of on my radar of career options. Of course, it was something that I had done my entire life. My earliest memories of drawing, I think I was like 3, is my earliest sort of memory of me drawing something. I had to have been about 3. That's what I remember. But it was just something that I did, right? I remember watching it's a documentary called, I think, 20 Feet from Stardom. It's about like backup dancers. And I remember the backup singer, Mary Clayton, or not backup singer, just the singer Mary Clayton, because she had her own career as well. She said that she did it so much that she thought everybody could do it. And that's exactly how I felt. I didn't think anything of it. It was just what I enjoyed doing. And I would be bored, I would draw. I would be sad, I would draw. I would be excited, I would draw. It was just what I did. And I just thought everybody did the exact same thing, in my own little world. That was my thinking. But Miss Owens, my 11th grade art teacher, took her class twice. She sort of nurtured the possibility of me doing something more. Now, even with that, though, there was the idea that even if you are pursuing art, you have to pursue graphic design. So that's sort of how I got into graphic design, because the thought process was that you couldn't make a living as an artist. Of course, now we see people do this quite frequently. It is certainly a possibility. But at that time, that's what the thought process was. Like, artists didn't make money until after they had died, you know? And so the push was get into graphic design so that, you'll have some sort of job stability or whatever the case was. And that's sort of how that got started. So I studied graphic design, right? I like graphic design. However, it is not, I prefer illustration, right? It's just sort of my preference in terms of if I had to choose between the two mediums, I would much prefer to illustrate than to do design work. But I am very, very happy to have the skill set. And a lot of the work that I do for others is very graphic design heavy and graphic design oriented. The superpower is, though, that a lot of times I do a lot of mix between graphic design and illustration, and that's sort of my happy place, right? So when I'm doing book covers, I'm doing illustrated book covers, but I'm also able to sort of illustrate my own assets when it comes to those book covers. And so I love that, right? I love being able to do it. I love being able to sort of have that know-how and skill set. But if I had to pick between the two, I would pick illustration hands down, right? If I had to only do one medium for the rest of my days, I would paint and I would illustrate. So that's sort of my passion and what I thoroughly enjoy. Of illustration, all the illustration projects that I've taken, I love to do flowers for whatever reason, and people, right? So I love to do people. I used to have, I used to struggle a lot with doing objects for whatever reason. So when I was in college and we would do still life drawings and things like that, um, I would have a real tough time drawing objects. People, of course, was just like second nature to me, but the objects was giving me the blues for whatever reason. But sort of as time has progressed, I have been out of college since 2008. So it's been a long time, and I've been consistently creating since then. Again, my entire life has been sort of finding the space and time to create something. I've gotten a whole lot better with objects. My next sort of hurdle is going to be, I would say, landscapes. But working on this project has sort of forced me to get better with landscapes. So yeah, I think as an artist, as sort of a human being, you have to be open to constantly learning. You have to be sort of open to correction, right? Open to learning and growing and continuing to evolve as time progresses. So what I'm doing now is just sort of randomly sort of laying in folds. I don't know if these folds make sense yet because we're still sort of building out the fabric of this dress, but I am wanting to emphasize shadow where her legs would be. And I drew those in with these very faint lines, and I'll sort of bring our sketch up just so you can see it a little bit better. So where we have these darker lines, right? That is the indication of where her legs are. So we want to add a little bit of shadow as to say that the fabric is sort of wrapping around her legs, right? So we're just fleshing this thing out. I do want to add some other colors to her sort of the apron top. So we'll get there in a bit. But yeah, just laying down colors. I'm going to see what feels right. And then I'll tighten it up wherever I feel like there should be, a little more nuance and a little more razzle dazzle, if you will, which I think is one of my favorite phrases. Where there needs to be a little more razzle dazzle, we'll sort of do that. But we do want to keep in mind that we're working on fabric, so we want to emphasize where things fold, sort of over her skin, and we'll see this a little bit when we get to her apron because it will go with the flow of her sort of chest, right? And we're again using our Queen of Wands as a model for this. And then I'll go ahead and turn off my sketch just so I can see what I have. It's looking pretty good so far. I'm going to take my smudge brush. So anytime I'm doing something like this, I'm usually working with two brushes, right? A smudge brush, and this one is one that has sort of streaks in it. And I'll zoom in so you guys can see just a little bit of what I mean. So when I'm moving or using this particular smudge brush, it is creating these streaks. So these sort of streaks, which are kind of light because again, this is fabric. So I want to keep in mind that I'm creating fabric. So I do like that. And then I'm just using this regular old brown or round brush. Now, if I wanted to add texture to this, for me, my favorite brush is like a chalk brush, but I do want this to feel kind of satin, right? So our Queen of Wands' dress feels like it has a sheen to it. And that's sort of what we're going for. Again, keeping in mind that our little girl is going to glow, and I don't know why in my mind I see her glowing like a hot pink, sort of like for you guys who are familiar with The Last Dragon, how Show Enough glows red around his hands. I want it to be something like that, but in a hot pink color. I don't know why. It's just in my mind. I don't even know if it's going to work, but we'll see. We'll get there. So yeah, I'm just sort of using those tools because I know that the smudge is going to give me a certain texture, and I know that this particular brush is very it doesn't have any soft edges or anything like that, so I can just kind of work between the two to move the pixels back and forth, and it helps to sort of create the feel of fabric, right? So where I feel like maybe this yellow might be just a wee bit too strong there, I'll take my smudge brush, move it around, and then I will select that same yellow using my eyedropper tool, and I do that by selecting hitting the Alt key, and then I'll just drag it down, right? If I want it to be a little bit lighter, where it says Restream is my color picker, I'll just move the saturation up and down up here at the very top. Just move it up and move the volume. Actually, I want to move it down, and then I will sort of brighten up this yellow just a bit. All right, going back to my smudge, just kind of blending that in with what we have there and moving forward. Yeah, so I think that sort of stepping out on faith, if you will, just for a lack of a better term, to create the Cosmic Gateways Tarot has been in and of itself a victory because it took me so long to sort of work up the courage to do it because I had sort of cultivated an audience based on fan art because I did a lot of fan art. I still do a lot of comic book conventions, which I absolutely enjoy. So I've done a lot of those types of events. And at those events, people like to buy what they're familiar with, right? I think there is certainly an audience for buying or creating original work. I take my tarot images with me and they sell just as well, sometimes, if not better, than some of the like fan art pieces. But for the most part, I had spent several years at that point. I think I started doing conventions in 2014 and I started my deck 2019. So about 5 years I had been doing conventions and creating art specifically for conventions and other events such as that. And so it was very scary for me to sort of say, okay, this is great. And I'm glad that people are sort of connecting with these particular images. But one, all I'm doing is sort of selling other people's ideas, right? Recreating other people's ideas in my own voice. But I'm also just kind of reselling other people's ideas, which didn't sit well with me. And also, I'm not being fully invested in or fully sort of fulfilled by the art that I'm creating. Right. And so, as someone who is super duper serious about, my craft and making sure that I'm doing the best that I can, I wasn't really showing up for myself, not in the best possible way. And so, I started to take a little chance here and there. I would do original pieces. I was doing, I think I had a couple of sirens that I had created. What I will say that is that a lot of the projects that I was able to do up to that point did allow me to create other characters. For instance, I had done a comic book for Vortex Comics, I believe. It's been a minute. But I was able to do a couple of their covers, which allowed me to do dragons and different heroes and things like that I had never seen before. So that kind of gave me a taste of it, right? A taste of being able to create freely. But I was still sort of afraid to, step out there and fully embrace it. So like I was when I remember when I posted the very first card, I was like, hey, guess who? Guess what I did? And that was sort of how I sort of took a leap of faith, and I'm glad that I did because I ended up attracting the people that I wanted to, enjoy the artwork anyway, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is show you how I sort of created this lace look. It was super duper easy. All I did was select a light color. So this is sort of a light pink because let me see. I think I'm going to go with a slightly whiter color, and then I'm going to brush in lightly, something like this, right? I'm going to color that in. So where I color on top is going to be a little bit more opaque, but I don't necessarily want to do super light, something like this. And then what I will do is pick in between colors, and that'll sort of give us the illusion that this is a sheer sort of lace. All right. So it's going to auto save here. So while it does that, let me show you guys just as a reminder what the Cosmic Gateways Tarot looks like. Anytime it auto saves, I'm like, that's a perfect, a perfect time to show you guys these images. So far, I believe I have 30, I think I got 42 cards left to create. So I have about, what's that, 36 or so done. Is that right? Something like that. 36, 37, 36, something like that. Cards done. This is most of them. I have not updated this in a while, so I'll go ahead and update this probably in the next week so we can add some of the newer cards in because some of these repeat. But yeah, I'm really proud of the amount of work that I've put in. I'm so thankful for you guys for coming by. So whether you're watching this live or the replay, and if you're, really interested in what I do, right, I really appreciate having you here. It means a lot because I remember doing my first live stream, I was extremely terrified to do it, right? So what I just did was, before I get into that, what I just did was I laid down a color, but what it is doing is creating a in-between color. So I got this sort of pinkish color. And if I lay on top of it, it looks like it's sort of sheer, if you will, right? And then I can kind of pick up this other in-between color, something like this, and do it like that. And then what that will do is create the illusion that this is a sheer panel. So here's another sort of in-between color. So maybe this part is sheer, maybe this part overlaps it like so. And we'll just sort of, and that's kind of gray, right? But that gives me another sort of in-between color. And then we'll go over it, something like that. And then we'll go over with a darker color, right? I'm going to zoom out here just a bit. And I actually do want to turn off my sketch because it's just a little bit distracting, just so I can kind of see what I have. There we go. And so that's how I create this sort of lace look, right? Just playing around. I do want to make it look somewhat uniform, because if this was fabric, it would likely be uniform, right? So we're just going to clean up our shapes with our in-between colors, and nothing too fancy, right? And it doesn't even matter if this is opaque again, because we can come back and clean it up and make whatever we need to be bright or more white. We can make it more white. All right. So yeah, I was terrified to do these live streams. I was. I don't know why, but I was. But I'm so happy to have you guys here with me, watching again, whether you're watching this live or the replay. Man, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate you for being here. And I know I'll be running my mouth, but I do enjoy having you here, watching me paint, because I was afraid of like making mistakes on camera. But I will maintain that a lot of my art is just a series of happy mistakes. Now, I do have this lace on a separate layer, just in case I don't really like how it looks. I don't want to affect whatever I've done to the yellow, right? And I'm just going to go through and clean this up just a bit. And I want it to feel, I want to have that overlap, something like that. Something like that. So it doesn't have to be super duper fancy just yet, because what I'm going to do here, first of all, I'm going to zoom out to see how that looks so far. So far, so good. We're going to remember that this is going on a card, so it doesn't have to be, uber perfect or anything like that. Now, on top of this, now this is our lace layer. I'm going to label it lace base. On top of that, I'm going to do lace outline. And from here, what I'm going to do is lower the size of my brush. So I want it to be smaller. So something like a liner, right? I'm going to get pretty small. And then I'm going to get extremely white, or white enough for this scene, right? We don't want it to be too white. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go over, and maybe I'll do it just a bit bigger. Brush, there we go. We're just going to go over something like this. And I don't really have this stabilized, so whatever shape I come up with is fine with me. We're just kind of creating sort of this outlined look. And then along the edges, and usually this is something that I would do sort of at the end, but we're getting sort of ready to wrap up her dress. So I'm going to go ahead and add this detail and sort of show you how close I get to this. So first of all, I'm going to outline this so that it looks like it is a part of the trim, right? So something like this. Ooh. All right. And then from there, because I'm looking at my Queen of Wands, it looks like I gave it a whole stitch. So let's do that as well. And this is going to give it just a little bit of finishing touch. And this is so small that you really won't see this part, right? Like you won't be able to identify that I put a stitch in her dress. But it will sort of add to the overall illusion that she's wearing something sewed into her dress, right? And this is tedious. And again, this is not necessarily necessary, but it is something that I do sort of when I'm going in and refining things. I will add stuff like stitches, right? And I will add tiny details to some of the art pieces so that it looks fully sort of fleshed out, right? Again, because she is not the main character of this story, her dress won't be as elaborate and she won't have as many things, going on for her, but we can add some finishing touches, right? So that it feels like she's actually wearing something. We can kind of give it form and definition and meaning, right? All right. And I'm gonna zoom out so that you guys can see just what they did, right? It doesn't do much, but it does enough so that it looks like she's wearing sort of a stitched top, right? And we can add in here because I'm looking at our Queen of Wands and it looks like she has quite a few layers to her lace. So oh, maybe we add some extra bits, right? So that it feels like organza or whatever the fabric is called, and something like that. So she looks great. All right, now what I'm going to do from here is sort of work on her apron top. Now I do have an idea of adding more color to this because right now we have like a slight banana cream yellow. But I'm going to do all of this on a separate layer just in case I don't like it, and I'm not affecting my main base of information. But before I get into that, though, I do want to make sure that I have a nice solid base. So what I'm going to do is raise the size of my brush. And a paint bucket could work here, but it's not going to get all of the bits and pieces. So I'm just going to manually select the same base color. And I'm just going to brush over some of the areas where we're not really as flat as I need it to be, right? And then I'm going to turn on my sketch and then we'll just kind of go over it. Now, I do like the idea of the Queen of Wands having sort of blue in her costume. I also kind of have the idea of having her have some of the other colors. So maybe she has blue and red and green in her apron to say that she's the matriarch of this situation. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we'll sort of try, right? We'll try. We'll start with blue and see where that goes. What am I doing? We'll start with blue. We'll see where that goes and then go from there. So from here, what I'm going to do is think about the curve of her body, right? So I want to emphasize certain things. If I were to sort of dip in, it'll give the illusion that is sort of going with the flow of her body. If I were to dip up, that may emphasize the curve of like her chest, right? And we want to sort of have a little bit of a dip here because that is a fold in her arm. And we'll do something similar like this so that it looks like it's a stripe, but it's sort of following the curve of her body so that it's just not like I'll show you. So it's not just like a flat stripe across her chest, right? We do want it to feel like it's a part of her, right? That it makes sense to what she's wearing. So something like this, and we'll go ahead and clean it up. And I'm going to rotate my canvas back and forth until I sort of get to a place where I'm happy with. I may even take this stripe up a bit, something like this. But I do want to play with sort of the shape of this stripe because she's in movement, right? So it's a good idea to reinforce the fact that she's moving by sort of tailoring how I paint in the details, right? And another way that I can emphasize this, and I'll do in just a second, is we'll add shadow to certain aspects of it. No, wrong thing. Just want to clean it up a little bit. Just like so. And then you know what, because it's not sort of coming down here, maybe rather than have it, so we'll do something like this so that you still see the underside of her apron because we see it on the other side. There's sort of a space between the stripe and the base color. So we'll reinforce that here. And then this, there we go, something like this. Something like that. And we can just sort of take away and redraw aspects of it until we're happy with it. kind of like that. And then what I'll do is I will deselect the whole apron, and I'm just going to select this particular part, right? Because I have it on its own separate layer, sort of allows me to do that. And then from here, what I'll do, and I'm going to do this on a separate layer as well, just in case it doesn't work out the way I'm envisioning it working out, is I'm going to select a shadow color, and I'm going to start to emphasize where her body folds, right? So we do have a bit of a shadow with uh, her arm here, right? So we want to reinforce that shadow just a bit, and it will make her wrinkles in her dress make a little more sense. So we can use these shadows to sort of continue to emphasize the wrinkles in the folds in her apron. So I don't know how much that is showing up. So what I'll do is zoom in for you guys to see it. And then what we're going to do is add some highlights to it, and that'll make it stand out even more. All right, so I am going to take that same sheen color from my Queen of Wands, and I'm just going to brush this in. And because we have this as sort of an apron style top, it's going to have folds in it as well. So I think I want to do something like that, and I'll select one of those in between colors. There we go, something like this. And that's how I would approach it. And we also want to keep in mind again that where our light source is. However, because this is a softer fabric, maybe something like a cotton, it's not going to pick up a whole lot of reflected light. Her dress may, because in my mind, her dress is a satin dress, right? So that I would do something like this, right? All right, I don't really like, let's see. All right, I don't really care for this area. So I'll sort of extend this out a little bit. Something like so. And then if I wanted to, I can add an outline around it just so it stands out. Maybe it feels like it's sewn into the dress. So we'll take this dark shadow color. We'll just sort of go underneath the base of this. Something like this. So it's very, very subtle, right? And we don't necessarily want to outline all of it, but we'll sort of emphasize different parts of it. Right? Something like that. And then this really should go in a little bit deeper because that is sort of the fold of her cloth. And so as I am kind of creating the creases and the folds and things like that, again, I want to pay attention to the way that I want this to appear to wrap around her body, right? So I just want to take that into consideration. Sometimes when you do this and you may have trouble with, okay, well, where should it fold and where should it do this? You can look at your own clothes, right? So if I'm looking at my sweater, my hoodie that I have on, I can see that I have shadows, right? I can see that there are highlights. I can see that there's a light source because there's a window off to my left. There's a light source here. And so I can sort of use myself as a reference to figure out how fabric lays on the body. And then I can translate that into creating something for my characters. Now, all right, so that looks good. I'm going to merge these two layers together. This is apron details and layer 4 because I didn't name it. And then from here, I kind of want to experiment again with adding some of the other colors that our ladies are wearing. So what I'm going to do, and maybe not have the stripes be as wide, but let's see, like I like the green that our little girl is wearing. So maybe I'll add some of this green in here. I don't know if this is going to work. If it doesn't, I'm doing it on a whole new layer so that it doesn't interfere with what I have going so far. And then again, I'm going to select only the apron shape so that I can draw only within that space, and then we'll see how it goes, right? So again, artwork oftentimes, for me anyway, is a series of happy accidents. It's like experimentation. Hey, Black Zatu! It's experimentation, and we just kind of go from there. Shout out to you, Black Zatu. I hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great day. All right, so here we go. Let's try with this green. So I actually think I'm going to put this up underneath the blue because I think I want to do this right up against her blue, right? I think. And then if I want to create sort of a space, I can do that. Something like this. And then we'll follow the same sort of trend where we'll lay shadows and we'll use our blue as a blueprint, right? For where we want to lay our shadows, where we want to lay our highlights. And then we'll go and, again, reinforce some of the folds and the creases in her body as it lays on top of these big old puffy sleeves. I think I kind of like this. I don't know. We're going to see. I'm going to lay in the third color and then we'll see how I like it. Now, another way that you can approach this in terms of laying in shadows is you can actually take a base color. So most shadows are cool tone colors. So you can take something like a blue. You can take a base color and then on a whole new layer, and I may show you how that works. In a whole new layer, you can set that layer to multiply. And then once you multiply that, it'll sort of change the shadow color, but it'll all be sort of the same color. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, so I'm thinking the next color I'm going to do is this red that our big sister is wearing. So maybe she, again, has the connection to, all three generations. Maybe something like this. And I just kind of put this layer underneath. And again, I don't know if I'm going to like this. So I'll know for sure once I zoom out and have a look at it. But I am doing this on a separate layer just in case I like sort of the green and blue, but maybe not the red. I don't know. But what I do want to do is sort of make a reference that, a nod that she is the matriarch of these women. She's sort of the head of this ceremony. And they each are wearing their own special colors. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so let me clean that up just a bit. And because I'm doing it this way, if I want to change sort of what the colors look like, so if I think this red is too deep and dark, then I can go and lighten it by itself without lightening the rest of it. So working on separate layers is definitely a game changer. Just don't be afraid to merge them bad boys when you're ready to move on, which is what I did here. So they're not quite even, but I think this is good enough for me to see if I like this or not. Then I can go back and change it. But if I wanted to, let's say, for instance, I want to go ahead and add shadow to this and I want to do it in one clean sweep, right? Without having to go color by color. What I can do is on top of both of those layers, I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to change my blend mode to multiply. So this big old menu that just popped up over to my right, to you guys' left, I think. I'm going to change the blend mode to multiply. And then I'm going to pick this background blue, right? Because this blue will sort of tie everything to the scene. And then from here, all I'll have to do is sort of paint on top of wherever I want this shadow to go, right? And right now it's looking extremely dark, and that's okay. But I can sort of paint on top of it. And then what I'll do is lower the opacity just a bit. If it'll catch up to me, there we go. If I lower the opacity, that'll sort of allow me to add a similarly toned shadow. And then I can clean it up and do whatever I need to do from there. I think rather than do that though, I would prefer to do each layer, just sort of go layer by layer and use whatever the native color is. So if it's green, use a green foreshadow, like a darker green. I could use darker red, that could work. So let me zoom out to see how I like this. Because I don't know if I'm going to like it or not. I don't know if it's too dark yet. We'll see. I don't know. We could work with it. We'll see. Because I don't know if it'll stay here by the end of the day. But we'll see what we can do. All right. So I'm going to get rid of this layer because I don't like the multiply technique. But what I will do is clean up each of the layers that I have so far. So I think this is green. So I'm going to... There we go. Yeah. Clean up this green. Make it a little more uniform. And then I will do the same for the red. And then we'll sort of see and also add some of the details to the actual like white apron part, right? So maybe in the top, the lace isn't white. Maybe it's like, I don't know, blue. I don't know, So we'll sort of experiment and see. But until then, let me go ahead and clean this up. This layer is on top, so we can actually probably do quite a bit here. If I wanted it to be wider, I can, and I think I do want it to be slightly wider. But again, we're also remembering the shape of our grandmother's body. We're just evening this up. Now I could probably draw this in as a shape with my selection tool, also known as the lasso tool on different programming like Photoshop. But I'm just going to sort of manually do this. And then I will see by the end of this, I'm going to keep it. I know for sure probably going to keep the blue. I'm not really sure if I'm going to keep the green and the red just yet. I don't know how well I like it, but we will sort of get it to the best that I can get it to, and then I can make an informed decision, right? All right. Oh, wrong color. So on my red layer, I'm just going to select the red. Actually, you know what? I'm going to select this in between color red. There we go. So something not quite as intense, but it is pretty close to her skin tone. So we may add a fourth color just to sort of tie everything in. Maybe we'll come back around with this blue. Maybe we will do it so that there's space in between each of the colors. And I'm just I'm just talking this out loud to myself, but yeah. So this is sort of how I do it. I just sort of experiment and see what I like, what I don't like, what I want to change. If I want to push it further, meaning if I want to add more details, like I did with the lace, right? This is mighty close to her skin color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to tonal correction in the menu panel, and I'm going to select hue and saturation because I don't want it to feel like that's her skin showing. I'm going to make this a little more pink, I think. There we go, something like this. So it's not so red and it's not so close to her skin. You want it lighter, something like that. Looks good to me. All right, now when we go clean it up, I'm going to be picking up that new pink color. There we go. Because what was happening is that I found the red to be very close to her skin tone. And I find that to be in our character as well. So I'll go ahead and update that when we get around to her. But I don't want it to feel like this is her skin, right? I want it to feel like this is part of the fabric. And then from here, I can tighten it up even further, right? Make sure that our stripes are clean. And before I go into adding details in terms of the shadows to the red or pink and green layer, what I think I'm going to do is do that to the actual main color. And that way I can establish the folds and things like that there. And then I'll just mimic that in my stripes. And then I'll decide, even though we're doing all this work, I'll decide if I want to keep them or not, right? So I'm going to clean up my blue just a bit. There are a couple of weird humps in it, right? Something like that. Okay. All right, back to my red. Let me clean that some more, and then we will work on the apron, and then we'll go from there. But so far, she looks pretty good. I'm gonna zoom out here and probably turn off the sketch so you guys can see what we've done so far. So far we have what did we do? We added some folds and things into her dress and into her top. We are now working on her apron. So see where there is, it's pretty flat in this area, right? We want to make sure that we add folds to say that her arm and shoulder are there. And if I am confused about where her shoulder sort of meets, the rest, her chest and the rest of her body, I can refer back to my 3D image that I created in Clip Studio for this particular piece. And I am seeing a little bit of something that I want to change. So we'll work on that. That'll be with the red. But before I do again, I want to go ahead and make sure that I lay in the folds and fabrics and things like that, folds in her fabric. So so I'm going to refer to this figure here because this is our grandmother model, and I am going to use that as a basis to know where to put shadow in her apron. So what I'm going to do is come down here to Granny's apron top. I'm going to control select it and on a new layer. Why? Because again, I don't want to mess up something that I've already done. I'm just sort of going to use this as a basis to say, all right, there's a shadow here under her arm. So I might mimic that shadow in her apron. What are we doing? And lower the color a little bit, something like this, right? And then I know that there is a little bit of light here or shadow here. And if I don't like it, I can go ahead and I'm going to take a kneaded eraser so that it's not super duper harsh edges, but we'll sort of get an idea of what we want here, like so. We know that we want to emphasize certain things. So for instance, there's shadow here, right? And then if we don't like it, we can select our base tone color and sort of paint back over top, like so. And then if I'm not entirely sure what this should look like, I do have references for someone wearing a very similar top that I can use. And then that's how we will we'll sort of use it as a basis for, how we should lay out the folds. And of course, this is they're in motion, right? So, but what it is doing is showing me where some of the folds and how these particular tops tend to sort of have folds and wrinkles and things like that, and where I can put some of the shadows, right? And if we need to, we can take our smudge and we can tighten this up, and I'm taking smudge specifically because it's going to give me a little bit of texture, and I can play with that when it comes time for me to add highlights, right? So in this case, I may not leave the sort of striations that the smudge brush is creating, but it is sort of helping me determine where I want certain highlights and shadows to go, right? Yeah, so here we are. Again, if you guys are watching this live or the replay, if you made it this far watching the replay, bravo. I really appreciate it. If you made it this far watching me live, baby, I appreciate you so much. I really do. Bravo God to you guys for showing up for me. I really, really appreciate it. From the bottom of my heart. It means a whole lot. Because like I said before, I was terrified to do these to do these live streams. One thing I'm really, really happy about though is to have you guys again show up in the chat, but it's also giving me an opportunity to talk to some really, really cool people. So we've done a couple of interviews, a couple of sort of art tutorials with Sam and Lee. We've done art tutorials. We did an interview with Ajay Richardson. So if you guys have not had an opportunity to check that out, on the live panel, there are a couple. I think Zajay was August of 24. So you'll have to scroll down a little bit to find hers. And then we had 2 videos with Sam and Lee, which I also had a awesome time sort of explaining my process and things like that. So if you guys want to see more of that kind of thing, just to sort of break up the painting, paint with me lives, let me know. And if you want to come on here live with me, I would love to have you here. I really, really enjoyed the interview that I did with Zajay because it gave me an opportunity to sort of hear the process of creating a deck from a different creator, right? Someone who was taking a slightly different avenue of creation. So that was really, really interesting. We were able to sort of hang out and vibe on that level. And it was a lot of fun. So if you're interested in things like that, I would highly recommend checking out that particular video. But again, if you would like to come on live with me, I would love to have you here with me. I sure would, especially if if you have something you're working on, or if you have, like we did with Sam and Lee, have questions specifically about artwork and digital art and sort of the process of even if it's graphic design related. I know I talked a little bit about having more of a passion for illustration, but if it's graphic design related, I don't mind having that conversation as well. I do enjoy graphic design. I do. I spend a lot of time doing it, but I think I feel a little more passionate about, I should say, illustration because I get to create stories on a slightly different level. Both, I think, are mediums specifically for communicating ideas, right? Usually with graphic design, where you're selling something, or a lot of it is advertisement geared towards advertisement. Whether that's social media or whether that's book covers or any of that. So I do enjoy it. It definitely has its merits in my book. I've spent many, many years, developing sort of the expertise in that realm. So I do enjoy it to an extent, but I love to draw as well, right? So it's sort of one of my first passions, I would say. So I would love to have you here if you're interested in joining me live. Again, if you have a project or something that you would like to share, would like to tell us about, would like to sort of share your process. If you want to do some art critiques, we could do that as well. I would love to sort of give you some pointers on how to improve your artwork as best I can. Shoot, you might be teaching me something, So I would love to have you there. But I think that's going to be it for today. I'm for sure going to continue working on this portion of this painting because I see some areas that I would like to clean up, but I don't want to hold you guys for that. It might be a little tedious to watch. But again, I do appreciate you all for being here. Shout out to Draw Sketchbook. I'm really, really happy for your comment. This made so much sense, and it's something I wholeheartedly stand behind. And they said that sometimes we have to create the things that we want to see in the world, and I stand by that 100%. So if there's something that you want to put out in the world, don't wait for somebody else to do it. Sometimes you actually have to be the one to do it yourself. Again, if you want to come on here and talk about it, I love to hear you. I love to hear about it, and I'd love to hear from you. Shout out to Black Zetsu for checking in on the live stream in the chat. And thank you so much, PL. Shout out to you as well for wishing us all a happy Sunday. So without further ado, I'm again going to continue to work on this. So by next week, we should be on a new character. I'll have Granny pretty much done. So again, thank you so much for watching this and for stopping by with me today. If there's something that you would like to see me talk about, or you have any questions about anything, please leave them in the chat if you're watching it live. If not, please leave it in the comments below. I will see them and absolutely reply to them, and we can maybe talk about it in a live stream. So until next time, I hope you guys have a happy, creative, and prosperous day. Peace.